Okay, welcome to Toyota time at Timmy's Garage. Today we're going to do the valve covers, cam plugs, spark plug tube seals, and reseal the half moons on a Toyota 4runner. It's the 3.4 liter V6 engine, which is on the third generation 4runners from 96 to 2002. And it's all to do this job. It's not that difficult, but you have to take off a lot of stuff. A lot of tubes, a lot of wires. You got to take the upper and lower plenum off. Throttle body comes off with the upper plenum, or you can take it off and clean it, and we're actually going to do that today also. I'm going to go around the engine starting on the passenger side and work my way around to the driver's side, kind of pointing out stuff you'll have to take off. Number one is it's good to remove this clip right here for this wire loom, because you're going to be cranking on that a little bit to get the passenger side valve cover off. You have to disconnect the clip here and a clip here to release the wire loom off of this so you can remove this air tube. You have to take the clamp off here and a clamp off here to remove this tube. You also, if you want to service your mass airflow sensor at the same time, it's right here. It's held on by two Phillips screws. In order to get to that, probably best to remove the air box so you can get on there solidly with the Phillips head screwdriver to take it off and clean it. You'll have to disconnect this tube right here to get the air box off. You have to unclip it here. You have to disconnect this tube right here that goes to this part of the air box. You have to take off this throttle cable. Pretty easy, just disconnect loosen these two nuts, and then you slip the wire out. It's got like a lead or steel end that just kind of slips in that slot right there, you can see. You'll have to move these wires out of the way. Actually, this clip has moved on this guy's Sean's engine here. You'll have to disconnect this tube, which connects to the upper plenum. There's tubes underneath this throttle body, and it's kind of hard to see in this video. On my 2000 engine, there was 3 of them, and what I learned is after you disconnect the bolts holding the upper plenum off, you can peel it up, and then you can access clamps to get those tubes off underneath the throttle body. Much easier. Coming around here, you'll have to just remove the tubes on these hangers right here. You're going to take off the bolts that hold the upper plenum. You got one here, you got Torx head bolts here, and you got another bolt on the backside here that holds the upper plenum on. And then when we get to the lower plenum, I'll show you the bolts where those are at. You have your diagnostic here with a ground wire. You'll have to take that off. There's another fuel harness that you have to take a little bolt out that holds that in. If you could see here, there's a bolt that holds this clamp onto the lower plenum. You have to take that bolt out so you can remove the lower plenum. Right here, you're going to have to take this tube off the upper plenum, and right now that looks like about as much as I can show you. But basically, you got to take everything off. Tubes, wire connections that allow you to take the upper and lower plenum off, so where you can get to the valve covers to get them off. Another thing I want to show you guys is that when I did this job on my 2004 runner, I marked all the tube connections and I marked all the electrical connections by putting a corresponding number on the tube itself and where it connected. So this way, making reassembly was really easy, straightforward, so I wouldn't miss anything. I wrote down, this is my last job, and I wrote down all the notes in the order of the way I took things off. I also did a diagram of how the spark plug wires went from the passenger side coil packs over to the driver's side. So I marked the direction of where they were going. And then when I was all finished, I basically just reversed my process. You can see I had a lot of notes. I had 3 pages of notes, so I wouldn't forget anything putting it all back together. I made a diagram of where the bolt pattern for the upper plenum and a diagram for the lower plenum, so I know exactly where the bolts are going to go. We're cleaning the throttle body out with some throttle body air intake cleaner. We took the throttle body off the upper plenum. You can see the black deposits in there, so we're going to clean this up really good and clean up the baffle, put it back on with a new gasket to the plenum after we're done cleaning it. So this is the air box. This is the orientation. This is the front of the vehicle. This is the passenger side. And the mass airflow sensor is attached to the air tube right here. It's 2 Phillips heads. So in order to get to it, you really have to take it out. Easier just to pull out the air tube so you don't strip out these little, you can see how small these Phillips heads are. So all I got to do is take those 2 screws out, and then I'll show you the cleaning. So here's a look into the mass airflow sensor what you want to clean, there's little wires in there, and you spray the mass airflow cleaner on those wires, and it dries pretty quick, but spray a good amount in there, and because you get a buildup of dirt on those wires, and that's where you could throw a check engine code because those wires have accumulated some dirt. There's another thing on the side here. What you want to clean is those wires on the inside. Spray it in there, let it dry, and then reinstall it on your air tube. So this is mass airflow sensor cleaner, and what you do is you spray it in this side right here where the wires are. Spray it in there. Putting the throttle body back on, clean it up really good with throttle body cleaner, and since we have a torque wrench in our possession, we're going to torque these bolts 13 foot-pounds. My foot-pounds torque wrench doesn't go down to 13, but I have an inch-pound, and so 13 foot-pounds converts to 156 inch-pounds. I'm just going to slowly cinch them up in a crossing pattern. Tighten them down a little bit at a time, bringing up the spec. This is the best way to put any type of thing back on with multiple bolts, to use a crossing pattern so you tighten it down evenly. That clicked. Not yet. Oh, slipped. That clicked. That clicked. And that clicked. Okay, so we got it now at factory service spec of 13 foot-pounds or 156 inch-pounds. Okay, I'm up on top of the engine here. There is the bolts to take off, or the nuts and bolts to take off to get the lower plenum, is number 1 here. There's number 2 right here. This one goes all the way through, number 3, number 4, and then back here there's another one, number 5. All those have to come up and you can pull the lower plenum off. Also, you have to take this little vacuum hose off, and you got another bolt here that holds this clamp onto the back of the lower plenum. You got to take that off too. Okay, so we've got the lower plenum off. We had to take this little vacuum hose off. We had to disconnect a small bolt on the back for this wiring harness. And then we also had to take off these 2 clamps that hold this, this fuel line. So now, before we go any further, we want to cover these intake holes up. So what we're going to use is some painter's tape, because it doesn't have a real strong adhesive. It'll do the job of covering the holes, but won't leave like a sticky residue. This wiring harness is super brittle, so when you're pulling on this, because there's not an easy disconnect to disconnect this wiring harness to get it out of the way so you can pull this valve cover off. So as you pull on this to get your valve cover out, it breaks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some duct taping, not like the gray stuff, but the type you use on like heating tubing, and I'm going to tape this so when we pry on it, if it starts to crack, it's not going to break off little pieces and go into the valve cover area when we're putting it back in. So we're going to tape this up. Okay guys, the driver's side valve cover is the hardest to get off because this wiring harness is plastic and it's brittle from being on top of the engine for a long time. So when I did mine a couple weeks ago, this thing broke apart pretty bad, and I taped it with this kind of tape. It's basically the type you put on like heat ducting. So what I'm going to do differently on Sean's truck here is I'm going to tape it first before I start pulling on this thing to get the valve cover out. And hopefully that if it cracks, it's going to crack underneath the tape, and the tape is going to kind of hold it together, and plastic pieces aren't going to break all over the engine. We used that ducting tape to secure this plastic wiring loom, so when we're torquing on it to get this driver's side valve cover out, if it starts to crack, it's not going to break off pieces, and little plastic pieces are going to go everywhere. And also, reinstalling it would probably be the trickier part, or the more important part, that if anything breaks off while you're slipping the valve cover back in with the new gasket, that you're not going to leave any plastic pieces underneath your valve cover. So now we're going to take off the bolts, the 8 bolts that hold the valve cover on, and we're going to pull this driver's side valve cover out. We've got all 8 bolts out. You can use extension and get all these bolts out. What you're seeing here is that the old washers are kind of glued to the valve cover, and you could just knock those off with a light tap with a screwdriver and a hammer after you get the valve cover off. The back bolt over here closest to the firewall, you need to use a swivel, because you don't have enough room to get in there straight with an extension. A swivel on an extension, you can get back there and get that back one, no problem. So the way I did this last time, as I pulled the valve cover up, and I came out this direction with the front edge coming out. Oh, we got another hose. We got a disconnect right here. Got anything else that's hanging us up? As you can see, it's not the easiest thing to do, but again, you can see how it's coming out. So I came up with the idea that it comes out this way. You got to crank on the wiring loom a little bit, and it's out. Nice to have an extra set of hands. You can see the gasket's kind of stuck on there, and we've got the driver's side valve cover out. These are the spark plug tube seals that we're going to be replacing. We'll show that later in the video. This is your valve cover gasket. And looking at his engine, looks like it's pretty darn clean. There's no sludge buildup. Very good condition from what I can see. Let me point out a few things from right here. See this collar right here? This houses the cam plug that we're going to replace. You look back here, my finger's pointing at this half moon. You got to pull those out and reseal them with the Toyota Fipg or some RTV. And there's another one in the front. My finger's pointing at it right here. And you just grab those with a pair of pliers. I put some tape on the pair of pliers and pull it out. And Sean actually bought replacement half moon, so we're not going to reuse these. But we are going to put a new cam plug back in here, and we'll show you how to do that later. So you can see how dirty his valve covers are. This is the Pcv valve, and this is a little rubber grommet that holds it in. These washers aren't a permanent fixture of this valve cover. You order new ones when you do the valve cover job because they got a little rubber seal, and so it's good to replace them. So what I did on mine and what I'm doing on his now, I was just going to take a screwdriver and just knock them off. Okay, so we'll start with the page here. So this is the page in the factory service manual. It shows that you got to bend up the little tab on the ventilation baffle, which is right here. See that little tab right there? You got to bend that up first, and then take a screwdriver at an angle, and it says using a screwdriver and hammer, tap out the gasket. So you basically deform it enough to where you can grab on it with a pair of pliers, or you can just kind of lever it out with that same screwdriver. This is not getting in there. I'm going to get underneath there to lift this thing up. Let's see here. There we go. I'm getting a little purchase there now. It's not really heavy-duty piece of metal, so it's pretty easy to bend. Just bend it out of the way so you can remove the spark plug tube seal, and that looks like enough clearance. So now I'm going to grab my hammer. Now we put some rags to protect this tube on the top of the valve cover because we're going to be pounding on it at an angle. We don't want to damage that tube. And I'm going to hit it at an angle and deform it. It's kind of coming out in like chunks a little bit here. I'm going to bend it a little bit more out of the way. Now you want to try to not damage it. I scratched up a little bit, but that's not where it seals. And then we could get another rag here. I was thinking we could lever it out by grabbing onto it and levering it out. It's kind of coming out in pieces. This might happen. Let me pound on it a little bit more. See if I can get a grip on it now. Well, looks like his is in there a little better than mine. There we go. That was it. Just takes a little bit of prying. I use these 90 degrees bent nose pliers. Seem to work pretty good. And then now we were going to put the new one in. Let's dry that up. So now we're going to show you how to install one of them. So factory service manual says use a 32 millimeter socket, and you're supposed to pound it in to where it's flush with the upper edge of the cylinder head cover. I actually pounded mine in a little bit further. I'm going to try to get these in right flush with this lip right here, because you can see these are flush, other ones are flush, the old ones we haven't taken out yet, and it goes in this orientation, not like this, but like this, with the lip kind of extending up towards the valves. So set that in there, the tab's out of the way already, and then we're just going to tap this in place with this hammer. I'm not doing very much force here. It's kind of light tapping. It's going right in. Okay, I got to get this backside in a little bit more. Like I said earlier, I didn't bother with this. I just sunk it all the way in, and it goes down maybe a millimeter more or two than the lip. That looks pretty darn level. After you're done, we're just going to bend this tab back down. So we'll still be able to in the future get a screwdriver in there to knock this out. And it looks like it's pretty well in there. We just bend the tab back down. Bend it down a little bit more like this, and then you can tap this with a screwdriver or maybe like a little punch. Just tap it down. Just be careful, don't use a lot of force, because if you slip, you're going to go right through your new spark plug tube seal. Like that. I just slipped a little bit, but I didn't damage it. Doesn't take a lot of force. And that's bent down, and so that's how you install one. We're going to do the rest of them. What I'm going to show you is that I actually, just like you're driving into any other seal, I drove it in to where I was getting like the right sound, so it's bottomed out. So yeah, I don't think you really have to worry about getting it exactly in line with this lip. You could still get a screwdriver on there and pound this thing out if you were going to do the job again. So we're now going to show you how to change the spark plugs, which this is a very basic thing, but in case you haven't changed your spark plugs yet, while you got the valve cover off, this makes changing the spark plugs really easily. These are the three spark plugs that go to the cylinders. So I'm going to take this one out. It's a 5/8 socket, and this is one I bought. It's kind of cool. It's magnetized, so when you loosen the spark plug all the way out, it will pull it out because it's magnetized. And that was in there pretty loose. Take them out. And here it comes. And this is an NGK. And looks like plugs are in decent shape. But we're going to change them anyways. So let's go do the driver's side. You could see that this side looks a little bit more worn. Not bad, but we're going to replace them all. What we're going to show you guys now is that we're going to remove the half moons. There's one here on the front of the head, and then there's one here on the back of the head. This back one's a little bit harder because of where the cam is. It doesn't give you as much room, and plus this is up against the firewall. It's going to be a little harder to get that one out, so let's show the easier one first. I basically just have a pair of channel locks taped with some electrical tape to protect it. Now you can reuse these. You pull them out, you clean out the sealant, and then you reinstall them with new sealant, because this is an area where some people are getting leaks. But since he's going to replace these. We don't really have to protect these with electrical tape, but I'm showing you how you would do it if you wanted to actually reuse these. So just get a grip on it, pull straight up. See how easy that was? Came right out. And you can see how it looks. And you can see right here where it looks, where it came out of, right there. So what you do is you clean up the old sealant, you put new sealant on it, and reinstall it. Simple. Let's see what the rear one's going to look like now. Now this one is a little harder to get, like I said, to get the jaws on. So let's see if I could do it with the channel locks first. Oh, that was easy. Simple. So that's how you do this. And again, you can see the old sealant on here. All you got to do is clean up on the head side, and you got to clean up these pieces. You put a bead of Toyota Fipg or RTV sealant right through here, like a heavy bead, and you smush them back in, ideally where you're going to see a little bit of sealant coming out on both sides, so you're getting a really good seal. And that's how you do it on one side. The other head has exactly the same thing. It's got 2 half moons on either side, and that's how you do the half moons. Okay, so I'll show you where the cam plug is. It's underneath this collar right here. So you take these 2 bolts off, you pull this collar up. Again, you could use the trick with channel locks with the tape, and it'll pull right up. I did it before, and it doesn't take a whole lot of force, and your cam plug lives right behind here. Okay, so we're going to show you how to do that. On there pretty good. So get this other one loose. Am I on there? I'm on there. And that one's broken free. Okay. That's one bolt out. And the other bolt's out. You see, I still got the, I'm still using the taped up channel locks. You grab a hold of that collar that holds the cam plug in and just pull up. It came right out. And it should come with the plug. So here it comes. The plug is right here. And when the orientation, when you're putting the new one in, is that the concave side, or however you want to call it, goes towards the engine. The back side looks like this. So again, when you're putting it back in, the open cupped side faces towards the engine. And some people say that you put a little RTV or Fipg on this, but the factory service manual doesn't say anything about that. What it does say is putting a little bit of RTV here and here before reinstalling, because this is rubberized on the outside. So when you torque this thing down to the proper torque, this rubber seal meets up with the head and seals. So I don't really think you need to put RTV, but I know some people do. You can see how we cleaned off all the RTV. There's usually a little bit in the corners here. If you could see that right there on that corner, and on the other corner over here. And you have to clean off the half moons. You can see how clean they are now. Clean off the surface where the gasket's going to ride, the other half moon, and we cleaned up the area where the cam plug's going to go, and then cleaned up this side. So it looks like it's pretty well ready to go. We got to put some RTV or the Fipg sealant on the cam plugs, and we got to put a little bit on the collar for the cam plugs, and we'll show you where to put it, and we'll show you the page on the factory service manual where it shows where you should put the RTV on that collar. Here we're putting the new gasket in. You can see that the orientation is, it's got like a tapered edge, and then it's got more of a flat edge. The tapered edge goes into this channel on each valve cover, and at first when I was doing this job I thought maybe that it would be hard to keep the gasket where it is while you're putting the valve cover in, but this thing sits in these channels really securely while you're manipulating the valve cover gasket in position. And just work your fingers around the edge and push it all the way in where it meets up with the valve cover surface really good. So this one's ready to go. I think the factory service manual says to put actually grease. I did this job before and I just put a little bit of motor oil on my finger and lubed up these seals to make them a little slicker so they slide on the tubes easier. Okay, this is the factory service manual showing where to put the sealant on the plug. So right here and here, and this is the actual plug itself. So we're going to be putting it right there and right there, a little bit on each side, and then we're going to put the cam plug in there and install it with the 2 bolts. The spec is 12 foot-pounds, and that converts into 144 inch-pounds, so that's what we're going to torque them to. I'm going to put some of this Toyota seal packing Fipg right, and put a bead here, a bead there, and again the cam plug, the dished side faces the engine and the back side looks like that. And you could just, this has got a rubberized outside. This is what meets up in the channel and creates the seal. And then once you get it on there, you just slide it on there and bolt it up. So it's easier to. Put a good bead of it on there. It's okay if it smears out. So now I'm going to drop this in here. It's right back here. And it's in. Okay. So I got it in place, and then I'm going to put the bolts in. And then I'm going to take my little mirror with the light, and I'm going to take a look on the backside after we get it in there to make sure that everything looks good. Okay, before we torque this thing down, I'm going to take the mirror and just make sure the plug looks like it's in a good position back there. And it looks like it's good. Looks like it's seated in there. You can maybe put your finger back here too if you want to just push on it to make sure that it's meeting up. The factory service manual for the semicircular plugs shows just putting this little bead in the center here. But what we're going to do is we're going to pack a little bit more than just a little bead, and then we're going to slide them in. One side is a little bit thicker than the other. It's better to put the thicker side towards the engine and this side towards the outside. This side's a little bit thicker of a shoulder, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to fill it up with the Fipg, and we're going to slide them in place. So I'm going to load quite a bit in here. A little bit right there. You could just put this in right with your hands. So just going to slide it in place, get this wiring loom out of the way. And just press it in. What we're looking for is that squeezing out. Let me see on this side, a little angle. We want to see it squeezing out from both sides, and it looks like we got plenty on there. I'm going to wipe off this little excess for now, but we're actually going to put a little bit more on there before we put the valve cover on. So I'm going to get the other one now. So put another good bead on this one. Okay, that looks like a pretty good amount. Okay, I'll slide it in place in the back of the head. There it goes. Push it down evenly where it meets up with the either side of the head evenly. And that's it. That's how you put in the half moons. We're ready to put the valve cover on with the new gasket. So again, let me show you where you're supposed to put the RTV. We already got some squeezing out, but at those junctures of the half moons, at either side of this raised cam, right there, on the other side, where it meets, where the circle comes down and meets with the flat part, and then also the same thing on the back side. At every juncture, these two junctures where it's already squeezing out, right there where there's a little squeezing out already, and on the other side of the other hump there, where it meets down with the flat, you put another little bead of RTV or Fipg, and you're ready to put the valve cover back on. We're going to go in with the valve cover this direction. I've got this wiring loom pulled up with my left hand and feeding the valve cover in with my right. Okay, it's cleared that wiring loom on that side. I'll pull it this way. There we go. You could kind of grab the spark plug tubes and hanging up on. There we go. And we're looking to see that it's going down. You could kind of visualize the spark plug tube seals going over the spark plug tubes, and looks like we're good. Valve cover bolts started, and then slowly tighten them down in a crossing pattern, slowly taking them to spec. It's 50, I believe it's 56 inch-pounds, but we'll double check before we finish. We got the valve cover, all 8 bolts in, and we're going to kind of tighten them like you would tighten the head bolts. So we're going to do a crossing pattern.
We're going to do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So a crossing pattern, slowly bring it up to 53 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. So right now they're all cinched up, just hand tight. I'm going to give each one just a little bit of a turn.
This one wasn't tightened yet.
And we got this swivel on here because we need the swivel to get to the back one, so we're just going to keep it on for all of them. Bring all the bolts up to 53 inch-pounds. So we're going to now get the driver's side on, which is a little bit harder to get on. I'm going to go in underneath the wiring loom this way and then move the valve cover into the proper position. There we go. That's what it was. That bracket was fighting me. Okay. Make sure we're not capturing anything we don't want to get underneath there. And it's down. Push down. Make sure that it's going around all the spark plug tubes. It's in within the tube seals. It looks good. So we're going to get the bolts in and torque this one down to spec. Okay. We got this bad boy all back together. We didn't have any tubes that we couldn't find a place for, no electrical connections forgotten, no extra parts on the workbench. We didn't drop anything into the engine. So I think we're good. We're gonna crank it over and hopefully this engine starts for us. nice. Sounds good. Okay, so we're here just showing you after the job is done some of the tools we use to make this job possible. We have just two standard size sets of metric sockets, short and long. We have some extensions. We have a 3/8 ratchet. We have the 5/8 spark plug tube socket. We have the 32 millimeter socket so you could pound in your spark plug tube seals. We have an inch-pound torque wrench, which is good for torquing the valve cover bolts on, and some other torque specs for the cam plug collar and other parts. We have a hammer and a screwdriver that you use to pound and deform the spark plug tube seals, so you could then pull them out with this bent nose, 90-degree bent nose needle nose pliers. We use the channel locks with some electrical tape wrapped on the jaws to pull out the half moons and to also pull out the cam collar. These are a real handy tool. This is a spark plug tube, a wire puller, but we use this to actually pull some of the tubes off their purchase. It gets a really good grip with these rubberized tips, and they're a really handy tool to pull tubes off. This is just a basic clamp that I got at Sears to clamp off that one coolant hose that runs underneath the throttle body. And then we got a regular pair of scissors and this duct taping that I used to tape up the wiring loom so it wouldn't break apart into a million pieces. And that's basically all you need to get this job done. Okay, one thing that we wanted to make clear to everyone watching this video is that there's going to be some mild differences between the engines. What you're looking at right now is a 2000 Toyota 4runner with the 3.4 liter. And it's a little bit different than the truck we just showed that we worked on, the 2002. So what I want to show you that's different is right here. This is the cruise controller that runs to this cable right here. So I have a triple cable setup. This is cruise control. This upper one right here is the throttle cable, and the bottom one is the accelerator cable. Some people call this one actually the transmission kickdown cable. And then also underneath this throttle body, I'm kind of pointing with my finger down here, there's different hose connections than underneath the throttle body of the 2002. So when I did the valve cover gaskets on this engine, what I did is I disconnected all the hoses first. I took the bolts loose and I tilted the plenum up like this to where I can get at those lower hoses much easier. So if you're working on an engine with this orientation, I suggest you do it that way to get to the lower hoses. Other than that, those are the main differences. All the other connections, the diagnostic, the fuel connection down there that attaches to the lower plenum, it's all very similar to the other engines, but there is some mild differences with the cables on the top. Now going back to the 2002 engine, you could see over here on the passenger side wheel well, there is no cruise control. And when you pan over to here, he's only got one cable. He doesn't have the triple cable like that is on the 2000 engine. And also, like I said earlier, there is a kind of a different connections underneath the throttle body, but they're kind of similar. There's hidden connections underneath there that are a little bit easier if you just tilt the plenum up and get at them with a pair of pliers. And you go around here, you can kind of see it's just like the other one. Diagnostic, the fuel harness underneath there, very similar. But we just want to show you the subtle differences so you know what's going on. So the important thing is just remember that whatever you disconnect in order to get the plenums off and to get access to the valve covers, you got to put back on. So there might be some minor differences with the engines, but all you got to do is make sure you put things back together and you'll be good to go. So I hope this video was really helpful to you. And it's our goal that we're going to make the job easier for people that want to tackle this, because it's really not that hard. It's just a lot of things that you got to keep track of. And if you take your time, label things, you'll have great success with it.